Hello and welcome to Attacking Third. We're back kicking off a new week and we're doing things right with Mondays with LaBonta. And I'm running point, Sandra Herrera, your girl with McCall Zerboni. We're going to talk about some fun stuff out of week 5 here because something that Lo brought up is very important to mention. Rivalries. What are the ones that are ignited? What are the ones that are faded? We're going to have a deep dive on that today in this segment with Lo, McCall, and Sandra. We want to thank everybody for joining us here on Attacking Third, whether you're with us live on YouTube. Hello to those active in the chat. We'd love to see you. Definitely drop your thoughts on all things NWSL rivalries. Or if you're just listening to us as a podcast, that's cool too. Maybe you're not a visual person, maybe you're just a listening type of person. That's fine. We love you wherever you're meeting us at. We're just happy that you're here with us. Let's hop right to it with a check-in. Of course, got to hit the vibe check. Lo, I got to say, I'm really excited for this because this is my first time going to do one directly with you. I'm so happy to work with you. How you doing? How you been? How was your weekend?
If you saw the results, it was great. It's always fun to come on here with 3 points from the weekend. So the sun is out today now, so I'm good. And talk about gift Monday, throwing that in there.
Nice, nice. Love it, love it.
Well,
McCall, how you
baby,
been?
congrats on your PK. You were just smashing them,
Oh,
girl.
thank
So
you. I'm small. I gotta get that in there somehow.
Oh my goodness. Maybe like honestly, like, okay, let's pump the brakes on the rivalry stuff. Straight up, let's just start with that. We have to have a question about the Sellies here because we're coming off of not just one, but 2 weeks now here where we've seen some Brazilians popping out the backflips. What
Ha.
just like it's nothing, just like okay, like I'll just go ahead and produce a backflip out of
No, the
nothing
best
here.
part is their teammates didn't even know that they could do that. They just busted out in the moment. It's not like they're practicing them at training or anything. They're just like, "Oh, I'm feeling like doing this." Boom.
Oh my goodness. Did you like grab did you grab like Lorena or like be on the side and be like, is there anything you want to let me know? Like before we keep planning these sellies, like tell me.
I would die. So Bia only does one celebration ever. So that's just her thing. It's her signature. She'll only do that. So if she ever popped out that backflip, I think I would just be like, I'm out. Take me off the field. I wouldn't know what to do. That would be so
All
wild.
right, you busted out a very nice celly after converting the PK. I gotta ask, do you are you a dancer? Do you have like a dancing background?
Well, it's so funny because the responses to that were like half and half. So a lot of them, like the people, like my teammates were like, "That's so sick. How'd you do it on grass?" Then I had people call me out like, "Oh, her form is trash." And I'm like, "Bro, I've never done that in my life. I thought it was cool." But yeah, so I got 50-50, and then obviously your family always has to humble you. But yeah, I had fun. I felt silly. That's what I like to do. So
Oh
I
my
had a blast
goodness.
with it.
People were saying it sounds like your family was actually the one who actually
Humbling me. Oh my gosh. I'm like, whatever. Give me something good then. I don't know. A lot of the people I celebrate weren't on the field. So I was like, maybe I'll just do this.
It's always the one who love you the most that roasts you the hardest. Truly,
Right?
that's always how it goes. Oh my goodness! But it was for look, it was incredible, Sally. We love to keep it going. We can't wait to see what else you've got in the works for games in the future. And big 3 points because it's still this interesting phase of the season where it's early, but we're rapidly approaching maybe first quarter of the season behind us here. And I thought, something to note on in these rivalries out of this weekend in particular was how special they were. And you have to really kind of maybe be tapped in to have kind of picked up or felt on some of these things throughout the weekend. Because there was the very obvious one in a regional rivalry between Portland and Seattle, Thorns versus Rain. And this is a rivalry that dates back to the beginning of times in NWSL. And it kind of piggybacks a little bit, not in a complete direct correlation, but when people think sporting rivalries, a lot of times they think to those sports leagues that are very, very ancient. And some of those tend to be men's pro sports leagues and things like the NFL and the other big ones. And people get tied into the regional aspect of those things and just make the assumption that that is where rivalry essentially lives and dies. And while it's very cool that something like the Cascadia rivalry exists in NWSL, and it's one of the ones that we can kind of point at and say, here's one that exists, and it goes back a bit of a ways here in NWSL, there are others that are kind of finding themselves emerging alongside that. And the other interesting thing with rivalries is that they kind of shift with different eras of a season or two or three or 10 or 12 where we're at right now. But so I think we had two really good examples of those coming out of this weekend. And then you got the regional one, but then you also had something like Orlando Pride versus Washington Spirit, which I think folks can maybe kind of argue or agree that that's something that is budding at this time, that it's something that we found emerging at the end of the 2024 season. And now we're getting these glimpses and tastes of it early in 2025, whether it was in Challenge Cup to kick off the season or now coming out of week 5. So maybe let's start with that. It was 603 days since the last time Orlando lost at home in a regular season. It's a lot of days in between there. What for you, Lo, what actually constitutes a rivalry? And McCall, I'd love for you to follow on this because you are two players who have been in NWSL and have seen these things kind of grow and fade and reignite all over again.
Yeah, I think it's a good point to say, how they have changed. So, for example, I was having a conversation with Rocky Rodriguez, and she's been a part of big rivalries, right? When she was at Portland, she had the Seattle Portland one. She came from Angel City, and that one right there. I'm surprised they didn't have those two, San Diego and Angel City, play this weekend. That, to me, is an obvious rivalry. But then she came here, and she was like, wait, who's our rival now? And she immediately said Orlando. And I said, that's such an interesting viewpoint because if you watch last season, yes, that would be the two rivalries, right? We both came together. We had these amazing records and Orlando came out on top. But all before that, I don't even know if we ever lost to Orlando or even tied them before. So it wasn't a rivalry until last year. And then you think back, for Kansas City, we're like Midwest, so we could either have a rivalry with Chicago. I mean, Louisville's right there. Houston, I think they call it like the barbecue derby or something like that. I don't know. I think rivalries come from marketing sometimes as well. It's fans, players, and marketing, whatever they can make stick. It's like just try and make fetch happen. But for me, it's rotated so much. So Houston is someone we were always playing in Challenge Cup and Chicago as well. So for us, we're like, gosh, we have to play this team again. So when you build all these games against teams, that's when I think rivalries happen. And then there's this other one, like whether there's results or not, you're going to clash with the team because they're going to hit you just as hard as you hit them. And for us, that's happened as well. So that happened with Louisville, the last few years. And I was telling this story earlier, but when we were about to play Louisville last year, where all the players were like hyping up, we're like, here we go, this is going to be a hard game. And Blackfoot was like, why? And I go, what do you mean why? Like, that's one of our rivals. And he had no idea. He's like, I want the best for Bev, that's a great organization. And I'm like, no, stop the compliments right now. Like, you can say that next week after the game. Right now, they're like our sworn enemies. So it is crazy. It's changed a bunch, and I kind of like it, but I do like the historic ones, like Portland and Seattle. That will always be one. I think there's even one where they try and say, like, the space rivalry between Orlando or Houston. That might, again, be a marketing rivalry, but I love those. So usually mine come from just constantly playing teams and whoever just hits the hardest.
McCall, I'm really curious for you, like sometimes rivalries are like they kind of start and end with fans, for people in the stands or for folks viewing from home and for onlookers, that's where it begins. It's like, this is the club that I root for, and I don't like that team either because regional reasons or competitive reasons. And I just can't help but think that for maybe the casual viewer, they look for those trends whenever those games arrive, and they're like, well, which one am I gonna maybe root for in this particular game as a neutral? Who's the good one, quote unquote, versus who's the bad one, quote unquote? And I would love to hear from you on this because I feel like your history with teams, you have maybe had to find yourself leaning into the villain era a little bit, because sometimes folks don't like when clubs win a whole lot, and you have been on some pretty winning sides in your NWSL history. I can remember in covering some games how Thorns rosters were very dominant in phases of NWSL. North Carolina Courage, very dominant in phases of NWSL history. And sometimes when you're a neutral, you maybe are like, "Ugh, I'm so tired of just seeing that same team win over and over again." Does that add fuel to the fire of the competitive environments within rivalry games?
Oh, 100%. I think rivalries in sports are sometimes geographical. Like we'll see with the Pacific Northwest Cascadia rivalry with the Thorns in Seattle. So historically, that will always be there because of the geographical location of the two. But then you see them evolve or fade in other ways. And in soccer, for me, rivalries are when there's more on the line than just 3 points. There's like pride involved. There's, history of chippiness, or there's a reason or something happened. But my biggest rivalry was when I played for the North Carolina Courage and the Thorns were our rival. And the reason being was basically because we just kept trading titles back and forth. Like we were just trading championships, winning the Shield. And when the league first started, the Thorns were it. They were everything because they had the most resources, the most money, the best fans, the best stadium. So all the greatest players wanted to go play at the Thorns. I mean, we're talking about Tobin Heath, Christine Sinclair, Sonnet, Henri, Lindsay Horan Heaps, Adie Franch, Ali Long, Nadi Nadim, Meghan Klingenberg. They were all on the same team on the Thorns at the same time.
I love that you just named the whole starting 11. This is like 7 years ago.
Think about that.
No, literally, that's how they were. And so then you get these like little Western New York players like us in 2016 who end up robbing the championship from them in the semifinal, beating them in overtime. And then our owner comes from North Carolina, buys us, moves us down to Courage, which is how we became. So then the next year in the final, the Thorns are mad that we took it from them in 2016. So then they beat us in the final, but we won the Shield in 17. Then in 18, we win the Shield and the championship, 19 Shield and championship. But we were literally trading Shields and championships back and forth. It was wild for like 5 years straight.
It's honestly a little bit exhausted too on the media side. It was like, okay, like which one is really going to take it this time or this year? Shout out to like the literal starting 11 that you would just dropped just then. But I want to like shout someone out specifically. I want to give a special shout out to Meghan Klingenberg here, because for me, this is the other thing that makes the rivalry a rivalry, especially when you're kind of removing it out of the regional angle and you're talking about it strictly in like the high stakes competitive angles. It is so dope when players build and add to that rivalry. And Meghan Klingenberg does some media availability in one of these ahead of one of these very high stakes games, and says, we don't like them and they don't like us. And that's just how it is.
No, it was out in the open. It was clear. And like our finals were so spicy. We should look back on the stats on the fouls. Like it was crazy.
I just want to like, what is the tipping point, or is there a tipping point where the moment that comes into play where you're just like, oh, okay, that's what this is now. It's on now. Because you like mentioned like this like kind of 4 or 5 year window. But like how early does it start? Does it just start from feeling gutted from it, like losing out on a high stakes title, or does it just start as simple as a really tough game with a lot of fouls.
Well, I think for the Thorns, they were so used to winning and being dominant because they had such a strong roster. And then this team full of players like myself, Lynn Williams, Jess McDonald, Sammy. This was before any of us were on the national team, by the way. So we didn't have those big names. We weren't making as much money as them or anything like that. And then we came and surprised, robbed them of a championship. So then it was like automatic. We were their competitors. We were their rivals. And then every time we met, it was just crazy. And then we kept winning and performing. And then eventually we started getting called into the national team. And then we would go to national team camp and see them. And they were like, darn it, the Courage players are here. Let's look at them even more, But then, you got to get on the same page to go, win a World Cup. And so we were kind of like the younger, newer players to that reputation and dominance that the Tobin Heath and all those players had already created.
Lo, I like that you brought up Louisville because a couple of those games ended up in some pretty wild moments. I mean, there was a literal game in 24 where there was a 6-goal swing, splitting points because there were 3 goals apiece. Like everybody, I think, was getting accustomed to this strange era of additional stoppage time with the introduction of VAR. So
Oh my
games
God.
had like major pendulum swings for sure.
Wow. I just now like bring that up.
I didn't mean to trigger. I'm so sorry.
No. I was getting worked up like in a good way because when McCall was speaking of like just the Portland side, I'm like, she could play in this game right now and be just as pumped up. Like I could feel it in there. If you
I haven't let it go.
I'm like, oh, I feel it. And that's like, I wish sometimes like maybe I never want like a camera in the locker room because the locker room is sacred, right? Like that's beyond the players. But if they could just see you guys talking like that and put it on camera or for the fans, like it would be just way more hype. So that's why I was laughing. And then you brought up the game where we ended up, getting tied to in the 30th minute of extra time.
Yep.
I totally forgot about that game. But I think that adds to it too, because Louisville came to us in our new stadium. We were winning all the games at home, and we can go back and look, but they might have been our first tie in the stadium. So that we were like, oh no, absolutely not. We're going to go to their home and beat them then. And I think that just continues to add, there's always layers. I think, there's something that we always talk about because my husband he's retired now, professional soccer player. And we talk about the difference between men and women. Men will cross the line and they'll forget about it. They'll buy each other a beer. No, we hold this. We continue to keep it in there. We do it with a smile, but we're coming out hot on the field. And I don't know, McCall, I think you just proved my point. I can feel it. You still feel that from the rivalry. And I just love that. That's why we're at the level that we're at and able to play, because we just have those extra layers of motivation and fire.
No, you're spot on, because it's never a one-off. Every time you match up with your rival, it's emotional. It means more. And then obviously the community and the fans are such a huge part of it because it means so much to them. Oh, we're playing our rivals today and they're louder that day. There's more people that show up. It's just, honestly, what would we be in sports without rivalries? And I love that they continue to evolve and create too. More rivalries are coming. This new Orlando Spirit rivalry is kind of building. First of all, because they've played each other 800 times in the past 3 months, but because you guys are in the top 4 consistently now. Kansas, DC, you guys are always trying to chase Orlando, and so you're coming for their pride, their trophies. You're trying to take them away, and you guys are the closest ones to do that.
Yeah, and I think too, we keep adding teams into our league, which I love. I love that we're expanding. And so that switches up the rivalries a little bit because, we don't have the Challenge Cup anymore. We have the Challenge game. But back then, you would play the people around you, and then that's how it would build. Now, who's Utah's? And Sandra, you made a good point earlier that when I was first in Utah, Chicago was our rivals because Chicago would come to us and beat us at home. And we're like, bro, how did we let that happen? And they would consistently do it. So it would drive us insane. But now, BFC, their rivals. We don't know. And then we'll have Boston coming in, Denver. So maybe Denver will be their rivals. But it continues to change and evolve, I think, just because we keep adding more. So I'll be interested to see.
And once the game is over, it's etched in history. It's permanent mark in the column. And so it continues to build. Like, it almost gets worse and worse.
It becomes it becomes part of the lore that people want to hear about, talk about, and feel. Like, we're feeling it from you guys right now.
Like, think about it. So
Well,
we're still young as a league. Like, think about Manchester United and Man City. Like, have been around for way more years than we have. Again, every time they meet up, it's like for the pride of Manchester. And so, again, more historical columns of results is what continues to escalate it.
I think fans don't really get this side that players do, because it's not just that one game on the weekend. Like, as a team, we have to watch film on them building up to the game. Then we play them and we have to watch that film after as well. So you're sitting there just getting motivated the whole time. And that adds to it. Absolutely.
And if the staff and the admin do their job, they show the clips of games before when they scored on you or took things from you, and they just hype it up. They lean into it.
Not the rivalry.
The staff is poking the bear the whole week.
I was going to say, not the rivalry bleeding into technical staffs. That's incredible. You love to hear it. You love to see it. I like that Orlando Spirit keep coming up, Orlando, Kansas City keep coming up, because I feel like those are the more recent kind of rivalries, and those are the ones that maybe are born out of just that regular kind of week to week that you're talking about, where you're just like, okay, so we're prepping. It's not just a one day for some folks who are coming in and saying, okay, I'm here for match day. Entertain me. It's for you guys, for the technical staffs, it's an entire week that builds up to this one particular 90-minute day. And that is part of what it gets built into these rivalries. So I'm curious if that might be the newer trend for NWSL, something that maybe separates itself from men's professional sports leagues, like you were mentioning, Lo. Like, is it just about maybe creating and maintaining these rivalries that are kind of just week to week in regular season, that are just highly competitive, that folks maybe on a calendar don't imagine that they would be a sort of rivalry, but for players and staffs, it absolutely is.
Yeah, and to that point, I think you probably get this answer whenever you're doing media from a player currently, is that you focus only on the game at the end of the weekend. We're not pulling out the schedule and circling, like, you're training each day and you're only focusing on that one team. So honestly, if you want your mind right, think every game is rivalry game, because you'll just bring that extra edge.
No, that's a good point. And look, for those of us who have to cover it, or those of us who just folks who are season ticket holders or just fans that want to go for games, it leads to, in my opinion, I think, a better product on the pitch for sure. You get these games that you could see mean a lot more than just the 3 points in front of players or in front of staffs and in coaches. Maybe to close out, let's have some fun with just like kind of ranking things. In your opinions, what are the teams who have the greatest rivalries to date in NWSL?
Well, I want to touch recently on, because the Cascadia rivalry just evened itself this last weekend with Seattle winning. So now Portland has 16 wins and Seattle has 16 wins against each other. So that, for me, is like, now we're looking the next time they play. Like, okay, who's going to now have the edge when they meet up later in this season? And again, just that geographical built-in will never go away, because it's like for the pride of the Pacific Northwest.
So would you say
that one too?
Would you say it was fading before and now it's like kind of reignited again?
Yeah, because Seattle was looking a little sketchy for a second. But then, like, now Portland's, not holding up to their usual par. So it's
All
like
right.
this could go either way now.
Right now, how about you, Lo?
And well, I'm going to have to agree with her on that because who's the one that scored the winning goal? A rookie. So it's completely changing. And I also, we're speaking on rivalries and as players, but when I was watching that game, I could hear the fans so loud. And I'm assuming it was Seattle fans. I don't know how many Portland went down, but I'm like, that's amazing because you always think of Portland Stadium being so loud from their fans, and Seattle brought that energy. And that might have been why it got them that ball in the back of the net and got them the 3 points. So that's going to add to when they go to Portland. I can't wait to watch that game.
That's a perfect example because it's only a 3-hour drive. So it's easy for fans to get there no matter which stadium it's at. So it will be flooded with both sides of fans, whether it's home or away. Whereas in the Premier League, they limit the amount of fans that can come from the away team. But the NWSL will eventually have to get there one day where they don't want it to be louder from away fans. So they're going to have to limit who can attend, who you're representing.
I think that's fair. I think there are there's always going to be those kind of built-in regional rivalries. We mentioned, we're obviously talking a lot about Cascadia, but Lo also mentioned the Angel City and San Diego. These are two teams that are also kind of newer to the league, but because of their proximity to each other, are finding some early regional rivalry there. There's a big game coming up on CBS this weekend, and I think there's the regional angles are coming in there with Spirit going up against Gotham as well. DC, Jersey area folks are going to maybe be tapped into that. But I do think the NWSL is special in that way, in that, yes, there are teams that can maybe kind of compete, regionally, and that's sort of built in, but all of these very unique and special different things within them, where you can kind of pluck out these games and these performances like we're doing right now, where I didn't mean to bring up the bad memory of the Louisville game with Kansas City, but these are like the building blocks, right, of the rivalry. Like, whoever thinks of a 3-3 draw as maybe a building block of a rivalry, but that is one that exists in an NWSL rivalry here. And I love that players are maybe trying to pull coaches into that as well. We need to have more of it, for sure. I think, is there a rivalry that is too early to call a rivalry in either of your opinions? Is there something that, like, maybe the league is kind of saying like, this is, a rivalry, or fans are saying like, maybe there's a rivalry here, but you're just like not seeing it? It's just not making sense for you?
Well, more to come, because when Denver comes in, so it's like Colorado and Utah could be the mountain rivalry or the elevation rivalry, and so as the league progresses and grows, there's going to be more just the way certain states feel about each other, or they want to, again, control their region. And again, they're created. Rivalries just get created from some things happening in games, or losses taken away from teams, or I don't know, she said something bad about me, tell the rest of the locker room. Now all of a sudden the whole team's hype around you, and it's like,
Everybody's riding for you now.
To me.
Oh my goodness gracious. Well, look, maybe looking ahead to next week, Current gonna take on Courage. Maybe folks don't think that there's a rivalry there, but there's been some high stakes games there, right? Some Challenge Cup semifinals, when there used to be semifinals in Challenge Cup. Like, if you look into the history book of NWSL, you can actually probably find rivalry anywhere. And isn't that what we're all here for? I loved this. Lo, shout out to you, because you were like, what we got to talk about on Monday? We got to talk about rivalries. Boy, this was fun.
I chose violence on the beginning of the
That's
week.
right. You were like, happy Easter Monday. Let's go. Incredible stuff. Thanks everybody for joining us on this special Rivalry Monday with Lo. Attacking Third is going to be back tomorrow, in fact, because we just can't stay away. What can I say? We love to talk.
Let us know your rivals, what you think in the comments.
We love to talk. We love
Who
to
do you
talk
ride with?
football.
Let us know.
We want to hear from the people. This is why we not only do we do these episodes multi times a week, but we also often have them live where folks can just sort of hit us with their take. So make sure you all tap back in on Tuesday at 11 a.m. Eastern. We're also going to be back on Thursday, and NWSL action is back this weekend. So we're going to be chatting all things Spirit in Gotham, because you could tune into that on big network TV, CBS. And I know we're all very, very excited for that. But that's a wrap for us here today on Monday. LaBonta, you're the best. Thank you for always being here with us. McCall Zerboni, pleasure as always. For myself, Sandra Herrera, our producer, Mark, thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time.